Hey there, this is Manisha Kadadatur, partner at Zephyr Consulting Services and your host. Today's story is all heart. It is the wonderful and sweet story of Pavitra Chalam, an award winning documentary filmmaker and founder of Curly Street Media. She has a master's degree in filmmaking from the New York Film Academy. 7 years ago, Pavitra became obsessed with telling the story of baby Runa Begum, a child born with hydrocephalus, a birth defect caused by the buildup of fluid leading to a massive swelling in the head. You can catch that story on Netflix as Rooting for Runa. However, this isn't the first such story that Pavitra has featured. In fact, she's made a career of making documentary films of birth defects and of women's prenatal health and care. In our conversation, we speak of the reasons that difficult topics like these form the basis of her storytelling, the process of fundraising for documentaries, and how she measures the impact of those stories. Pavitra, how did you find yourself in filmmaking and did you set out making documentaries?
I think if you had asked me this question when I was 6 or 9, I was pretty sure I was either going to be an Olympic skater or a runner, because that's what I dedicated my whole life to till I was about 19. And I retired early from sport, from professional sport, and was fairly lost for a few years. But I do know the one thing that stayed with me through my life is storytelling. And I had this incredible opportunity to represent India in Pakistan as a youth peace ambassador. And it was really there that I grasped the importance of meaningful filmmaking and meaningful cinema. It was a difficult time for both countries, obviously, and we had quite a large responsibility placed on our shoulders. And at the end of the conference, we decided to document a statement of peace between both countries using film. Now, with my minimal experience at the time, I was nominated to direct the film. And, we had to come up with the script ourselves. And every person had his or her own sensitivities to deal with. And it was a complex situation. And I think the turning point was when we decided that the Indians would play the roles of Pakistanis and the Pakistanis would play the role of the Indians. And we ended up fighting for each other. That's when things changed. And we named the film Bus, which means enough in both Hindi and Urdu. And it was shot on a bus. And I think that was when I truly fell in love with how powerful and unforgiving, the lens of a camera really is. And I think that's when I decided that this was what I was going to do.
Oh, what a wonderful story. You actually had a role reversal and asked people to play another one's role in their shoes. Oh, that is awesome. So I'm going to ask you more about that. But before we get there, I would also like to dig a little bit deeper. You said you briefly touched upon your sport career. Tell me more about that.
So I started out as a skater when I was 6 years old. I went into roller skating, speed skating actually, and I went on to skate for Karnataka. I went on to win national championships. I think that was 4 years in a row. When I was about 9.5, 10, I think at that point, there was only that far you could get to with professional speed roller skating. And it was time to look at another sport. And that's when I transitioned to athletics and I trained with Sunil and Reet Abraham for about 10 years. I went on to run for state and ran at the national level. And yeah, that was my sporting career. That was my whole life, actually, till I was 19.
And what happened at 19?
It was a series of things. I had an injury. I fell quite ill. I got very anemic at one point. And, I remember my coach coming to me. I actually had to be given a transfusion. I mean, all of that got sorted out, but I had missed that season. And my coach came to me and he said, look, now is that time where you have to make a decision. And I believe there are wonderful things out there for you in the world. And this just may not be it, because now we've already fallen back a whole season, and I want you to think about it and, make a decision that's right for you. And it was a hard decision to say, okay, you know what, that phase is over. It's time to move on. But I think the timing was, now when I look at it in retrospect, the timing was pretty impeccable.
That's a hard choice to make when you're young and you're just starting off, and that's what you've dreamt of all your life. What about the filmmaking process spoke to you? You mentioned briefly that at that moment it all came together. You had both countries playing each other's part and it just fell in place. What was that moment? What happened there?
For me, it was the kind of inescapable truth, because we decided that we would put out there and put forward every misconception and historical error that we grew up with and make it into a film, you know, and to boldly put out there what our generation has carried in terms of baggage and pain. And, being in each other's shoes, that transformation in the whole film and what happened after and when it was screened, it just didn't matter that much as that whole week of being in each other's shoes, speaking for each other, fighting for each other, and building this beautiful project together. I think that is what just completely had me hooked. I couldn't believe something so transformative can happen in such a short span of time. And the beauty about filmmaking is that every single person is equally important. It's really like an orchestra. No one can function in isolation. And there's something really beautiful about that process. And I've always loved playing as a team, because, in my sport, it was a very individual sport, but that, being a part of something bigger has always meant the world to me. And the fact that, whether you are sound or the cinematographer or the gaffer, or even the person driving the equipment to set, if one person does not execute, his job or her job in the right way at the right time, everything will fall apart. And that's something quite amazing when you are a part of that and it works.
So, obviously, you'll have to elaborate now on the entire process of filmmaking. How do you choose your subjects? How did you find yourself telling the story of Runa?
I think every director will have a different answer. For me personally, it's always been, I think I would equate it, every single story that I have found, it's been like the process of kind of falling in love, right? You don't know exactly why and you don't know exactly how, but you do know that you cannot spend another day without being invested in the story. So almost all the documentaries that we have made, that's how it's been for me. And even with Rooting for Runa, I came across her photo the day the story broke back in April 2013, and in that moment it was just one of those things where I thought, we have to be by her side, we have to do whatever we can, we have to help this girl, and we have to tell the story. And 7 years later, we spent the next 7 years following that one story. So it's hard. I think for me, I've been so deeply driven by children and people with complex needs that the more I learned about the issues, the more the heroes that I got to document and make films about, the deeper I got into the community and understanding how invisible the story of disability and complex needs is in India. And I think at this point, I am deeply invested because I've seen it in different ways, in different, through different lenses of disability and rare diseases and complex needs and birth defects. So with Rooting for Runa, I had just finished my first feature documentary, Indelible, which followed the stories of 7 people with Down syndrome. So I was already very, very invested in the space when I found Runa's story. With a lot of fiction films, you make a film and you move on. With us and in the work that we do, I really believe that every film and every person who we work with and make films about carry on into the next project. because without that learning, there's no way we can go further and we can go deeper, and we can fight harder. And I think that's quite fascinating about the process of documentaries.
That's powerful stuff. Two questions for you. One is just about the story of Runa. If you can tell us a little bit more. I know it's playing on Netflix, and so definitely don't give us anything about the story that people can watch themselves. The other question that I had for you is on this whole emotional aspect of making this documentary, because you choose difficult subjects. They're hard to see, they're hard to live with, and they're hard not to do something about, right? So, two questions for you.
So, Rooting for Runa had its release on Netflix worldwide on the 15th of October. It was a really, really important day, and we're so proud that the world has finally got to meet Runa. And, I hope that everyone watches the story. It is a story about a mother and a daughter, and how this family really fought insurmountable odds to raise this extraordinary child. So Runa was born in a little village in Tripura in the northeast of India called Jirania Kola, and she was born with a birth defect that caused her head to swell to an unprecedented size. And the day that her story broke, a journalist friend of mine actually wrote the article, and the day that her story broke, people from around the world came forward to help this child. And I think this was also the first time that birth defects as a conversation was finally out there in the forefront, that people were talking about it. Because as far as we know, the magnitude of its hidden toll is just something crazy and invisible, and no one is talking about it as much as they should have. So when we found Runa, for us it was, we have to be with this child, whatever it takes, because in all the years that I've worked with complex needs, I have never seen anything like this. And the second thing was that as we followed the story, we realized that this is a symbol of hope. And no matter what tragedy has happened through the course of the 7 years, it never takes away from the hope. The fact that Runa got this chance, this second chance, means that millions of children like her will probably and can have the same opportunity. And to us, that was something extraordinary, and she became that, and still is that symbol of hope, that beacon of light, that look, there is a chance, there is a way for children to have the second chance at life. And I think we grew to love her deeply. She became a part of our lives. A lot of us spent more time with Runa and her family than our own families. We were there for every important event, every important occasion. We made sure that from her vaccines to her checkups to, anything that needs to happen for her would happen. We were really rooting for Runa, and, we had a dream that one day she would walk and play. And yeah, I'm going to leave you with that about the story. And I do hope that, everyone gets to watch it. And the response so far has been overwhelming. And that's really, really humbling for us.
Being a part of a child's struggle with health is tough. Being emotionally invested means putting the child and her needs above all else. Sometimes there is a feeling of helplessness, and yet you carry on doing the best you can.
The thing that happens with these kind of films, and specifically films that take this long and you really become part of the fabric of that person's family, is that it's like a relationship. It's like a relationship with a family member or a dear friend. And from that point on, that's just how you deal with it. And all of us have faced, in our lives, where you feel inadequate when someone in your family is say unwell, even a cold or a fever. You feel helpless, but you still do the best that you can, because that is all you can do. And I think with every film we've made, yes, we want to help. That's most important. But we also want the world to experience these heroes the way we do. And the way we do is from a very, very personal capacity. And I truly believe that if you don't have that kind of understanding and intimate sort of a peek into a relationship, you can never build empathy. And I think with films like Indelible and Rooting for Runa, we are so entrenched within the life of the family, and we put out there exactly what we have experienced. And if people can see it through our eyes and experience the love, the loss, the hope, the happiness, the laughter the way we did, I feel that that's a first step into building curiosity about, hey, how can we be a part of this? How can we help? How can we negotiate our way into being more caring about this particular issue? And so I don't know if that has answered your question completely, but as challenging as it is, I think we just look at it as a very, very personal interaction, a very personal and intimate relationship. And when you look at it that way, the whole perspective suddenly changes.
No, I think you've answered it beautifully by making it personal. Because when it's personal and you're trying to portray that through your film, you're really bringing out a very vulnerable part of yourself onto the entire screen.
It is it's quite a complex but amazing process. When I shot Rooting for Runa, I was not a mother. And, this beautiful surprise happened while I was editing the film. Being pregnant through the editing process was quite interesting, complex, sometimes tough. And then when we went back to the editing table again for the second time, I was already a mother. And so this film has also seen the course of that change in my life. I shot it not as a parent, but when it came together on the editing table, I was a parent and I definitely saw it very differently. So the emotional journey with this particular film has been so interesting and different from the others, purely because of my sort of parallel personal journey that was happening with my own child. So that is something that has been quite different to every other film that I've made. In fact, right at the end of the credits, we actually thank my son. We say, thank you, Johan, for your patience, because we had to finish the first cut of the film and my due date was almost there. And I kept telling, I didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. I said, you got to wait because I have to finish this has been going on for so many years. And just 2 days after we finished the first cut, my water broke. So the whole team was always so grateful that he waited patiently.
Do you think these sort of movies are made or documentaries are made better by women? Or do you think a man can actually find those emotions within him and show those on film?
I don't believe that a man or a woman can make a particular thing better. I think it's completely individualistic and personal. With Rooting for Runa, the protagonist is a woman, Fatima, and we were predominantly a female-led crew. And even though culturally we come from such different backgrounds, there was a common intersection, a meeting point, so to speak, just by the shared experience of having lived life as women. And I think that gave the empathy was so high. We had this unique insight into her deepest fears, her wildest dreams. And it is that honesty that fuels the narrative and is the heart of Rooting for Runa. So in this film, I think the fact that we were a predominantly female-led crew, I think it made all the difference. And women in front in this particular situation made all the difference. But we have, my co-director is male. He's incredibly empathetic. And, a lot of the team is male. And, they have very, very powerful emotions that have been invested into this film. So the answer to the question is, I think it depends. It depends on who and it depends on what.
Coming back to a question that I had asked, which is on the process of filmmaking. So there are different parts. One is the story itself, it speaks to you. Second is the entire cinematography that you actually have. But to do all of this, there is adequate amount of funding that's required because you're not making blockbuster commercial films, which are just out there to entertain, but you're making movies which are educational in some sense, and you're asking people to, and they're moving them enough to contribute, to do something about it, to get aware about it. How do you go about fundraise?
This is the $1,000,000 question. I remember back when I graduated from film school, I think I was the only person in my class who wanted to come back and make documentaries. And everyone said, why would you do that? It just makes no sense. There's no money in it. And at that point, and that stays true in a lot of ways even now, it is the hardest thing in the world to get funding for a documentary. But what it does take is for one person to believe that you are doing something right, and meaningful cinema is the way to transform, to affect change. So I think when I started out, I was a freelancer, and it was actually my godmother, Mrs. Hema Hatangadi, who gave me my first project, and then went on to produce one of the first films I made on complex needs, which actually went on to win an AMI award in the UK. And I think when she believed in my vision, because the issue at that point is, I can come to you and say, hey, Manisha, I have this dream, and I believe that I will make a film that millions of people can see and it will change the world. Now, where is the proof for you to say, oh, you know what, Pavi, that's right, go for it. So it is a very hard situation to be in. And the more I, got into it, I realized you have to just do. You beg, borrow, obviously try not to steal, but you have to actually make the films for people to trust you with something. So because Hema trusted me, and a few other organizations trusted me and said, hey, you know what, we think that there's something different in the films you're making, that went on to larger organizations saying, hey, actually, we believe in this, we'll commission this. So it's been a lot. We work in two ways. We either have a producer on board, or we have an organization that commissions a film. And the dream was to be out there on Netflix, and we just didn't think it was possible, because this film that we took so long making, we applied to 100 film festivals. We were accepted in 3 and we won only in 1. We were so disillusioned. Some of the festivals didn't even watch the film and rejected us. And then out of nowhere, the king of content calls us. And, they believed in the story. They said, this is one of the most powerful stories of our time. And we were completely, we had just gone through this half a year feeling disillusioned. And suddenly, 189 countries, people are going to watch this film. So I think the landscape has changed. I started out back in, when I came back from film school, it was 2006. I founded Curly Street in 2012. Most of the films that we made have been at festivals, organizations have used it. And finally now the landscape has changed just by being on Netflix. And I think now there is scope for us to do so much more. The fact that we have proved that we can means there will be more faith and, more belief, and also finally more money, because we actually, sort of walk the talk. But it took a while. It took a minute.
That's a very, very powerful way of talking about fundraise. I know, because I've done, participated in multiple fundraisers, and the ability to just listen to no multiple times over and over and over again, and just pick yourself up every morning and say, who knows, maybe today will be different, right?
Exactly,
and then go for it.
Yeah.
And not lose yourself and not get diffident or cynical, because cynicism is something that definitely sets in, right? After listening to about a 50 odd of them, you think you walk into the next one saying, yeah, he's going to say no anyway. So what's the point, right?
But I guess with faith, in fact, I should tell you this cute little story about fundraising. When we started out with Rooting for Runa, we didn't know what it would actually entail. And again, it was Hema who stepped in and said, what do you need? And I said, we need to get on a flight to Delhi today. And she said, Pavi, is this the film you've always talked to me about? Is this the one that you will follow till its natural end? And she said, it's okay if the answer is no. I just want to understand. And I said, I can't imagine leaving the story in a few months or in a year. I can't imagine doing that. So my answer to you is yes. And she said, just get on a flight and go. And as we were there, we realized we needed to raise money and we just didn't know how to do it. We wrote to every organization we could think of, but like you said, and it was just no, no, no. So then I had an idea. Crowdfunding was quite new in India specifically, and we decided to start this campaign. And so I wrote to 350 of my friends and family, and I said, guys, I haven't asked before, I'm not asking again, but if each of you can contribute about $15, I think we can set off on the path to production. And the response was just incredible. In fact, every single person is in the credits of the film even today. And we raised about $35,000, which kind of set us off on the path to production. And then our executive producer, Vanita Boswell of Indian origin, also an old friend who lives in the US, deeply believed in the story. And she came forward and, contributed her own money and raised the rest of the budget to complete the film. And much later on, we won a grant from the Women in Film Fund in the US at Sundance, and that helped us cross the finish line. So at every stage, it was really like, oh my God, will we even get through to the next shoot? Forget about, will we finish the film? But yeah, it happened somehow.
Pavitra, can you tell me whether documentaries make money?
The answer is yes. If you are on a big OTT platform, the answer is yes. This film was licensed by Netflix. They kind of bought it from us after it was made. But going forward now, the door is open for us to pitch our ideas to all the big OTT platforms. And, finally, that time has come where it's not going to be about scrounging. We present a budget, the budget will be approved, and we can move on, unlike what it's been the last decade where every budget was too much. But here, once you have proof quality, it's much easier. So the answer is yes, but it takes time, it takes a lot of effort, and it takes that proof of concept, which you just have to do and do and do, and you just never know whether it will. You have to just believe that it will see the light of day.
Yeah, you just don't know when you attain escape velocity, but you just have to keep going.
Yes, and
So
I think if the cause is right, I think, and also the story is right, and the story has to resonate. A lot of the times with documentaries, it only targets a particular kind of audience. And the one thing I've deeply believed in right from back in 2003 was the story needs to affect and connect to everyone, from my granny at home to the friend at the bar in Ireland. It has to. If you don't have a global audience understanding, then there's no point. And I think that's the trick with docs. If you can take a story of a village, a small village in India, and make it relatable to someone so far away, I think, and using human emotion, I think that is finally what sets some documentaries apart.
I think you hit the nail on the head. How would you measure the impact of your work?
Manisha, when I started out, it was a very singular focus, and that was, if I make a film that affects one person in a meaningful way, that if that person walks away and 3 days later is even thinking about the story, the person, or the issue, translates that into their life, that is impact. And over the years, obviously, it has grown larger and larger. I think with our films, it is very, very hard to measure impact because it unfolds every day. Films we've made back in 2010 are still being used in various spaces within the disability, rare disease, and complex needs space. But with Rooting for Runa, we started an impact campaign that is going to roll off the back of Rooting for Runa. And if we can bring awareness in maternal health and anemia to rural India, and have the smallest sort of measures put in place, right from folic acid to scans, and if we can actually do that, then I think we're really dealing with preventive health and intervention in a way that can be measured. So this is the first film where we actually go out and do an impact campaign. other than that, over time, it has just been with the way people have reacted to us, just the kind of films that we got to make after that, with the audiences that we've connected with. I think for us, that has been what impact has meant, just in terms of people and emotion, which is, as you know, very, very hard to measure.
That's something that I'm seeing a lot nowadays in the conversations that I'm having. So I've been frequently asking everyone, how do they measure the impact of the work that they do? And the common answer that I get now is that I'm not even sure I want to. I can measure the impact of my work, but because all that I'm measuring right now is the qualitative and the subjective aspect of it. But we're so hardwired internally, and especially in the business world, to make it numerical, to make it quantifiable, to make it, what's the ROI, or, did I move from point A to point B, and not look at any of the other emotional aspect of it or the qualitative aspect of it. But I hope this
Yeah,
conversation actually changes to make it more qualitative and subjective, because that is what will actually last.
absolutely. I mean, that is the only thing that will last, and that's the only thing that will sustain. Your numbers are great, but if there's no heart in it, it's not going to, live longer and go lifetimes.
So, what advice do you have for young filmmakers?
I think you just have to go out and make that film, make that first film. Don't wait for someone to believe in you to do it. Don't wait for someone, fund your script, find a way to do it. That is the only way that you can set off on the journey of filmmaking.